Hello, my name's Tom Kyle. It's 21st of the 10th, 2013. I want to do a video here about fractional reserve banking. Now, unlike 9 out of 10 of the people who tell you about things like this, they'll be very dry. It is interesting if you bear with it, but it's quite confusing, and then eventually you'll understand. But by the time most people will have lost interest. Because the big thing with any of these things is, how can this thing help me, right? Now, there's a couple of things that I've dedicated a bit of time to over the years, and one of the ones is that I don't just stop looking into something when I find out it's not very nice or it's not very good. I always stick with it, and I want to see how it can benefit me. Everything that's bad in the world can have a negative and a positive effect, because you can start understanding where the danger lies and you can avoid the danger. It's like knowing that lorries fly up and down the road, right? If they hit you, they'll kill you, but eventually you get to know that they go on that side of the road, and obviously they could go at a consistent speed. Eventually they don't really pose any danger to you. It's quite incredible because there's cars flying about all over the place, but they hardly ever hit anyone. So you start getting into this point where you start realizing that it's similar with knowledge. People go, oh, the lorries, don't talk about lorries, oh no, I don't want to hear about it. Well, it's like, yeah, but if people explain to you and they know about the lorries, eventually you'll start realising that they're not really any danger at all when you know how to deal with them. And this is the thing, when you see what path they take, where they're going to go and avoid them, you can listen out for them. There's all these different ways of minimising. Don't touch wood, you don't want to ever get hit by one, but there's all these different advantages. Right now, with fractional reserve banking, this is the one big thing you've got to get your head around, right? The bank only pays about 1/10 of what they actually lend out. So if you put £1 in the bank, they can lend out £10. It's something like that. Maybe it's a bit less. In some instances, I believe in Northern Rock, they were lending out 34 times as much. Now, I don't really understand, because they would describe that as an unusual gearing or something. But the whole point is, I don't see why they were doing that and why all the other banks weren't doing it. Because it would seem to me, well, you'd be making loads more money. So I don't really know. But I don't know. I don't really want to comment on specific instances, because I don't think it's particularly productive. What you've got to get into your head is, right, and I remember this man sort of talking about this in the internet once, and I believe he was right. He was quite a straight-laced type character, and it did make sense. Is when you borrow money, say on a credit card, right? This is where it gets. This is the very, very far end of how these things work. When you borrow money on a credit card, what happens is, before you've even taken any money out, let's say you've got a £9,000 credit limit, yeah? That credit card company predict that, say, 50% of people will eventually take that £9,000 out, and they'll only pay it back at this amount. They average it all out, and they've got a kind of indexing factors and all sorts of stuff, and they're allowed, off the back of your signature saying you might borrow that money, they're allowed to go and play the bond market. But often, because of their anticipating you having to spend a long time paying this money back, that's worth something to them. So you haven't spent a penny, but it's worth something to them, because they can gamble on your predictive future debt, and people can bet, it's all just like gambling, but that's how it works. It's the stock market, it's the financial services. Point is, right, and this is where it starts getting very hard to get your head around. When you start paying that money back, right, that may or may not be negative, because they can say, well, they're paying it back, so at least we know they're going to start paying it back. They're going to keep paying it back, and they can, span it out into the future and see how long it's going to take you. But the other thing is, if you look at their balance sheet, this guy was saying, now I can't confirm this particular fact, but it's true, but this is the very far extreme of what I believe is actually the case, and I can prove the other stuff beyond doubt it is the case. But this, I'm not too sure. He is saying that when you actually pay your credit card debt off, on their balance sheet, that actually makes them have a less healthy balance, right? Because you're paying it off, and that means you're not going to have to pay interest on so much over the next few, 50 years or whatever it is. Because this is the thing, I used to see it more in this particular light. is you get winners and losers. So you got 100 losers just getting in a complete load of debt, don't have a clue, and just get, if the credit card phones them up and gives them puts a fear of God into them, they'll just shit themselves and they'll just pay whatever they're told to pay. They won't just say, no, fuck off, I'm not paying it. So I thought, well, and people will always go, you're taking other people's money, you're bullying the like poor downtrodden, but you're not bullying anyone. Like, basically, I used to think it was like there's just a musical chairs thing. There's loads of suckers, and you can just take the money, and you're not really doing any harm because it's either you or the credit card company gets it. But the point is, it's a little bit worse than that, because what's happening is every time you borrow any money, you effectively, you're giving them, let's say, £1, right? And then they're lending out £10. But the point is that pound, if you actually talk about, yeah, fair enough, they can make more money by lending more money out. But the point is that £10 they say you owe them doesn't really cost £10. It only really cost £1. So when they're trying to get the money back, and this is the other thing, which is the interesting bit of a myth that gets propagated, is the interest will just keep going up and up. Listen, as soon as you don't pay that credit card debt, the interest doesn't go up. They start asking for it. They never actually get it, and they don't even ask for it if they take you to court. And they have tried to take me to court in the past, unsuccessfully, never got a penny. Right, anyway, the point is, and that wasn't a judgment against me that wasn't enforced. They just didn't get any money because I scuppered the court case before we got to court. Very easy to do. I can tell you easily how to do it. And they'll run to the hills. You'll never hear back from them again. Anyway, right, so basically what it is, let's say you owe 10 grand. You think 10 grand, that's a lot of money, or 15 grand. Well, let's just say 20 grand. Let's say you owe a credit card 20 grand. That 20 grand is only going to cost them 2 grand. Like, that's really what it is. It's 2 grand of their money, if it's that, right? Now, if you work for a credit card company, right, legally speaking, you could get someone who worked for that credit card company to act as a kind of agent of the firm if they're an employee, and they could just go down in place of a barrister and try and get your money, get the money back. But they're basically, most big firms are very kind of cowardly. They never let their employees go out on a limb. They never use any initiative. That's the opposite of how a big firm works. So what they'll do is they'll have to pay a barrister, and that barrister's going to want at least 2 grand. If he knows, especially if you're going to start, wanting to spin the whole thing out for ages, it's prohibitively expensive. So if you owe 20 grand, right, they're not going to be able to justify getting a barrister. Now, if a lawyer tries to take you to the small claims court on their behalf, which is sometimes what they do, it costs them a bit of money to do it. If you start fucking around and don't just go and say, oh, go on, they're not going to be able to justify getting that money. So they're not going to be able to get that money back. So basically, they can't get the money. You have to be down for loads of money before it's worth them taking you to court. Now, they'll give you a bad credit reference, and this is a bad thing about credit, is that, it's pretty much like a bit of a, it's arbitrary, and, it's not sort of democratic, because they just say you've got a debt. They tell Experian or whatever it's called, and they just say you've got bad debt. But you can, of course, get in touch with them and say, look, they threatened me with court. I was up for going to court. You better take that down, because what right have you got to do this? And you can give them their propaganda back to them and say, oh, well, I don't want to be, I don't want to have bad credit because, I want to buy a house and blah, 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 and you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get the court to remove it. You can't get them to remove it, right? So just be aware that that's how it works. I'm going to do some more videos on this type of stuff, but basically, I don't want to give you too much information in one video, because I know it's easy because I've done it and I know how to do it, but it wasn't something I just picked up like that. And I would sometimes panic when they send me letters about this thing and that thing, and I'd speak to somebody, there's people around who could explain it to me, so I was always fine. But if you're not in that instance, there's no good. You've got to be confident in how you deal with them. Do you know what I mean? And I'll do some more videos about this. Hopefully you'll find it very interesting. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.